The final thing that we left out with in Japan, right? The US did not want weaker Japan, and they wanted to give the technology to Japan, but just enough so that they don't go to somebody else. But in that process, what happened is people in Japan, they're really good. So they took the technology and actually they went ahead of US. Initially, they were taking the chips which were designed in US because US was the technological, ultimate, way ahead of everyone else. And Japan was taking just the chips, they were building the products and they were selling the products. And the products were super, right? I mean, the ideas that they were coming up with, and they really were good at making these devices. Like a Walkman, Morita-san used to say that, public doesn't know what they want. We know what you want, right? And that's the way it was like that, right? And because I lived through this transformation, originally the Japanese items were, type of thing, right? But then later on, TV came up, everything was being sold at premium. Okay, so it was the most expensive piece. That it was like jewelry, I would say. If you had a Sony TV, you were considered wealthy. At that time when I was in India. Later on, what Sony did was they did their own chips. They started doing their own chips. So they said, "Abhi ye to hum seekh gaye, hum to bana sakte hain." Correct? So all that stuff, that story we talked about. Now today's story is about a very interesting company called Micron. Have you heard name Micron? Micron, not the measurement size, but a company called Micron. Okay. So these are the founders, Joe and Ward Parkinson. They are from Boise, Idaho. Idaho is like a nowhere land. The description is like a potato farm field. Okay, so that's where these people were, and this is their picture. Joe and Ward. They were doing basically design on contract. Okay, so they are doing stuff basically in this place, farms, almost like in a village type of thing. Right? There are some companies who are. I think there is a company used to be in Dharwad here called Sankalp Electronics करके. तो ऐसे ही इनका operation था. मतलब they just wanted to stay away from humbug of the big city. That's what they were. Now they decided to basically get into. They said their first product was 64K DRAM. DRAM, everybody knows. What is DRAM? Dynamic Random Access Memory. And that was like the key thing that you needed, right? To build systems. Now, this is not, again, not from potato, as I like to say, because this is like a potato state. They were good, in terms of circuit design and everything. This small company, unfortunately, Fujitsu ate their lunch. Because it was Fujitsu is a Japanese company, and Micron kind of lost the market. This was like really good place they were in. They had good technology, but Fujitsu came in, and what was the key thing about Japan? They offered components at a lower price, and equally or better, reliability was better, right? So they overtook and they almost died. So he was basically Jack Simplot. He was into this potato farming business. So our guys, they went to see him, and even though Jack Simplot, if you see him talk, he would speak like y'all. It's like a Texan type of slang, that he speaks, and it takes a while, like a cowboy language. If you see old cowboy movies, he realized, I mean, the person has nothing to do with electronics. Electron, kuch pata nahi. Only thing he knows is farmer. Okay, so he realized that this is like ultimate opportunity, and he thought that this is a commodity. What he realized was that this memory business, everybody is going to need it, right? We need. So I like to call it like a dal chawal business. So he thought that this is a commodity market. This potato business, just like potato, these memories are like a commodity market. So here is an opportunity where the Japanese are eating our lunch. So we can do something about it, and then we can beat the Japanese at their game, right? So he basically realized that Micron is going out of business, so this is the best time to put money in it and just take a chunk of it. So 40% of the company he got for $1 million, which is like a really very, very inexpensive deal, right? Because that $1 million became, I don't know how many $billion, like over a period of time. And he was very active. Even though he didn't know technology, he would make analogies. The picture of him is on the bottom here. Okay, all right. So he basically, what he did was take the competitors head on. He was a fighter person, like he was in business, total fighter. And he said, we will do whatever it takes to beat the Japanese at their game. That was his thing, right? You know, the engineers, they were very, very forceful in doing the cost cutting. At every place they went into cost cutting. So, for example, you want to design a chip, try to reduce the die area. If you reduce the die area, you can put more chips on a wafer, and you can make more money. That's one thing. Then they went into designing things with the smallest number of transistors. If I make something with 8 transistors versus 6 transistors, there is a 25% gain. So similarly, they just went into their stuff. They simplified the process. The process steps, there are so many steps. They said, let's see if I can eliminate this. Let's see if I can eliminate this. करके करके उन्होंने बहुत सारा छोटा कर दिया. And then they were extremely efficient. I mean, this company is recognized for its efficiency. Okay, so with all this stuff that they were doing, including like when people leave the company, the lights are turned off. People really admired them for this because there was no other way. The company would have gone belly up. Does everybody know what belly up is? Huh? Belly up is you're dead. If you go look at a fish, the fish dies, it's belly up. It's floating in the water. So that's called, company would have gone belly up. I'm just teaching you subliminally all these slangs, right, that I know. So they were doing all these kind of things, right? And then what they did was very unique at that time. And the reason I'm talking about Micron today is they beat Japanese at the game. Okay, they were the first company to put a stake in ground saying that no, we will sell the chips and we will be better than you. And they were. So they really made a mark. And this was dal chawal. Everybody wants memory. They want more and more memory, right? You want to build a computer. This is what, that's what I mean by dal chawal. Okay, there is no negative connotation to dal chawal. It's just that so ubiquitous, right, that you have to use it everywhere. All right. So this is the story of Micron, and they still exist. They are here, and they're really doing well. And they really did a good process. Very efficient process, and most high-end memory chips are designed by Micron. Okay, all right. So what will you remember out of this discussion? American company, Parkinson Brothers, and there are 2 others. I don't remember their names, unfortunately, but they were the ones who started the company. They went to Jack Simplot. If you look up Simplot, then you'll see a lot of colorful stories, right, about him. And he was the one who bet on them, who had nothing to do with memory. But he is supposed to be considered a person who single-handedly changed the game of United States, right? Because they were in trouble, everyone was giving up. And it's a cascade phenomenon that you will see happening, right? Because Micron came up, Micron did well, and then the next part of the story comes in. Is that clear? Okay. So the next one in our story is, everyone knows, Intel, right? So Andy Grove. So there's a very good book. So this particular book, I read it long time ago. I don't know how many years ago. He has written this book about his Intel experience, and he has been through a lot, right? You remember what he went through? Nazi regime, then Soviets, the Red Army, the whole story I have told you before, right? And now he is at Intel. It reads very well, and you learn a lot from that book. I learned a lot. I mean, there are so many lessons that I learned from this book, right? So Andy was at the helm of Intel when this whole mess was happening in US. What was the mess? That Japan stole the lunch, Japan stole the DRAM. Who started DRAM? Intel started DRAM, right? They were the ones like who were the father of the child, right? And then the child is taken by somebody else, type of thing. So they started the whole thing, and they were making the chips, and they were selling it. And here comes Japan, takes the thing away. Now Micron is also in there. So Micron is making the chips. But there is something called, when stuff like that happens, right? Then if everything is going okay, if you're in steady state, and no big innovations happen. Okay, because everything is in steady state. Every day you're getting lunch, dinner, and you're continuing. But somehow your lunch goes away, then suddenly you have to think out of the box, right? So that's what Andy did. And Andy was I'll tell you more about him. So what happened at that time was 1980. IBM, huge company, big, right? They wanted to build a PC. So they took the chips, the original microprocessor chip, and they wanted to build chips. And then Bill Gates, everybody knows, one of the richest person on the earth, right? So he was a rookie Rookie programmer. Rookie means like a beginning, you know, just like you guys, right? You are all rookies. You're just studying, and you will slowly grow muscle, and you'll become big, right? So that's what it is, rookies. So he was a rookie programmer. He said, "Oh, मैं बना दूंगा." So he said, "I will write the software disk operating system," right? And then this combo of making PC, IBM, and Bill Gates, and the chip was going to be designed by who? None other than Intel. So basically, what happened? Andy realized is, hey, this microprocessor is looking interesting, right? Because the sales are much, much more than our dal chawal DRAM that they used to make. So they realize कि कुछ तो है इसमें. So they said, we will get out of the DRAM business. So it's like chopping your arm off and saying that, no, 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 we don't want to do this anymore because it's hurting us, right? And then we will just focus on building microprocessors. Right? I would call that as one of the strategic inflection point that happens, right? In anyone's life, your life, everyone's life, something will happen where you will suddenly be a different person from next year. So that's exactly the same thing happened. And Andy was at the helm of the company. So Andy and his lieutenant, Greg Barrett, he was the CEO of Intel later on. They were difficult people to deal with, right? Ruthless drill sergeant. They say that Greg Barrett used to take baseball bat and go in the factory. ऐसे करके जाता था. And their focus was very simple. Very simple. What was the focus? जो भी करना है, it has to be done very efficiently. Okay, so originally Intel was really good at innovation, but when it came to production, they had some loose ends here and there. And as a result, their yield was failing, and then you lose money. And big company, it was becoming a big company. So these guys, they really changed the company. And that laser sharp focus on survival, taking the microprocessor to its next level, and then become a virtual monopoly, right? Because you know Intel's name right now after so many years. One thing they did, which was very interesting in the stories that you read, Intel was running like a lab. So everybody is doing their own thing. So the DRAMs made here will be a little bit different than the DRAM made in another factory. So these guys realized it, Craig and Andy. They said, नहीं, एक जगह पे उसको perfect करेंगे, and then we will just copy exactly that process everywhere else. No questions asked. You shall do this. And with this kind of, laser sharp focus on production, they were able to basically, I like to call yield is king. If you don't get yield, then you might as well get out of the business. They didn't say it as such, but that's my perception of the whole thing is, how do I get best yields? Yield matlab kya? Your one transistor, if it's 99.9%, then the second transistor has a yield of 99.9. You multiply the two, things are starting to go low. Eventually, you're at 50% yield, and that's bad, right? So they wanted to, the final chip that comes out, they wanted to make it like near 100% yield. Okay, so and with this strategy at that time, it looked like, do I want to be in this company where I'm just like kind of made work like this, right? And the decisions were instantaneous. You're fired. If you don't do your job, you're fired. And they were so good that as soon as they entered the room, the lab or whatever, right, people were kind of worried कि आज किसका job जाने वाला है. And that sense of fear. And that fear word is important, I'm telling you, right? So the reason I'm using that word of fear is we all say fearless hona chahiye bare. Ye sab, this is like, BS in my opinion. You have to be afraid. You have to be fearful. Unless you're fearful, whatever work comes out of you is not the best. So that's what Andy is saying. You have to be very, very paranoid that somebody else is going to either kill you or something like that. In this case, it's not killing, but it's taking your whatever, the chips that you're designing and things like that. So around that time, and I remember this time very well in US, right? A Compaq PC company came up. Now it doesn't exist anymore, right? You have not heard of. There is no Compaq anymore. So the Compaq company, what they decided to do was, हम लोग clone बनाते हैं. So IBM was making these PCs which were like, they would sell for $1,600 at that time, 30, 40 years ago or so. And now Compaq said that we will do everything. We'll just reduce the cost of the PC and we'll flood the market. What that did was drop in the PC prices. If the PC prices will drop, then what will happen? More people will buy. Everybody starts buying, right? So except for Apple, all the PC prices were going down. Okay. So that helped. because now more people are buying, more demand, and then the microprocessor prices were dropping. So it became like pervasive. The PC, personal computer, became pervasive. And they became virtual monopoly. I mean, I shouldn't use the word virtual also. They're just monopoly in microprocessors. They could dictate the terms. So every year they would have new, I don't remember what was the one before Pentium, the 486, 586, all those numbers, right? They were all Intel microprocessors, right? And as I like to call, remember the word strategic inflection point. And that will happen to you. Hopefully it doesn't happen when you get married, right? So, all right, so let's move on to the next story. And the next story is even getting more interesting. What was the outcome of this particular Intel story? You have to remember Andy Grove. And Andy Grove had a very interesting personal story. I mean, I'll just give you a hint of it, right? He was detected while he was working with pancreatic cancer. And I've read a lot about Andy, that's why I know this thing, right? And he was like, again, you could tell what kind of person, even though I haven't met him, I can tell what kind of person he was. He really latched on, and he did all the research there is about prostate cancer, okay, by himself. Doctor कुछ नहीं चाहिए, मैं खुद का खुद देख लूंगा करके. And he did all the research and he survived prostate cancer. He basically, at a time when, so he was kind of driving his own destiny. And that's what he did. He drove the destiny of Intel. Basically, he took it on his shoulders, and a lot of other stuff happened again with him. He was detected with Parkinson, which is the tremor business, right? And but amazing personality. He was a fighter. Okay. The next thing is the South Korea story. So because we are kind of going in that time zone where all this stuff was happening, and I think K-pop everybody knows, right? So then I thought I'll use that to get your attention, right? So what happened in South Korea about this time when the Japanese, very similar thing happened. And the reason I'm telling you this story with so much passion is I would like you to connect the dots with what's happening with us, with India. Okay, that's the whole point I want to tell you, right? Because what's the point in listening to somebody else's history, right? We need to look at our own history, where we are, and can we do something at this point, right? South Korea was, at the same point, the Japan was time shift, right? So Samsung means 3 stars in Korean. 1938. This is way before this IC history where sab kuch happened, right? So they were basically initially just selling fish. Can you imagine that? Just like, what was the Morita-san's company? Sony? Sake. They were selling sake. So this company was fish and vegetable. But they were very happy. Very commodity based. Sugar. Sab kuch kar rahe the. They were doing everything. And, Byung-chul Lee, he was the founder of the company. He always, again, very visionary person. And he was born, I think, about the same time the hero of the previous story, Jack Simplot, was born, the Potato King, right? And he was also following the similar trend here, right? So he wanted to replicate the Silicon Valley. उसको छा गया था वो कि बस मैं यूएस में देखा हूँ, मुझे यहाँ बनाना है. सैमसंग में मतलब I want to build Silicon Valley in Korea. That's he was. So he would visit Silicon Valley in 82, 83, around that time, and he would go to all the companies, and he would go to IBM plant, and he would be taking pictures. The reason I'm telling you this story is because something that happened with me, right? So so hold on, right? So he was naturally taking pictures, and he was very surprised that these guys are not paranoid. They're letting me take pictures. What if I copy? So they said, people who were at IBM, they said, "Tu kitna bhi copy kar le, a photograph le le. You cannot replicate this over there in your thing, because it's not that easy. Just picture se kuch hoga hoga." So that was the thing that he was told. So he was fired up. He was, abhi to main kuch karke hi dikhaunga, right? So he basically then, Korean government is also realized कि Japan का तो शादी हो गया, हमारा कुछ बने, right? So they were saying कि, अरे, just like you can see what's happening with us, right? Our government is also saying, हमारा भी कुछ करते हैं semiconductors में, right? That's what is going on. So this they realized though in 1980, 40 years ago. So government said, whatever it takes, we got to build semiconductors in Korea. हम लोग को ये लो लेवल काम नहीं करना है, जस्ट असेंबली फिट करको टाइट करको भेज दो करके, वो नहीं करना है मुझे खुद बनाने का है. सो देन व्हाट दे सेड इज, किसको भी करना है हम लोग लोन दे देंगे, सस्ते में लोन दे देंगे. And then the banks got involved. The bank said, okay, we will give you loan. Loan is a very important element in a country's ecosystem. If you get loan at a lower interest rate, then the business will come and take the loan and do something, amplify the GDP of the nation, right? So they were committed. So then basically, Byung-Chul Lee was visionary in that sense. He kind of got into this, and he said basically, we want to beat Japan. So we will take US technology, we'll bring it to Korea, and this memory business was happening. The DRAM business was being stolen by Japan. So US again said, कोरिया को अपना भाई बना लेते थोड़ी देर के लिए, जापान को बीट करने के लिए. पहले क्या हो रहा था को रशिया को बीट करने के लिए, and they funded Japan, and then Japan took over. Same thing happened with Korea. They started giving stuff to Korea, and then Korea said, after a while they learned everything, right? And then this dal chawal DRAM business, right, which was taken by the Fujitsu, Toshiba, all those companies, right, just to beat them. These companies in Korea, they said, boss, yahan kar lenge. Abhi, the advantage that Korea had, connect the dots with us, okay, at the same time. They had cost advantage and they had labor advantage, okay. So the labor was cheap in Korea compared to Japan. So obviously they could squeeze the price down. And they were, the Korean companies, like for example, Samsung, they were making same type of chips cheaper. And initially they had problems, but then later on they refined their process very well, because I'll tell you a story about Korea. They basically learned all the technology from US, and US was okay, क्योंकि इसको जरा strong karte hai so that we can beat Japan. That was the whole thing. So there was a lot of, you remember the story I told you about, inside the family, the kids are fighting, right? Then you go to mommy, and tell them, oh, neighbor ka bacha beat kar raha hai mujhe, kuch karo karke. But in generality, you don't want the mother to get involved, right? Because you just want to play. So similar thing was happening in US. All the companies were going to mommy, meaning federal government, कि भैया कुछ तो करो, government कुछ तो करो, ये जापान हमारा lunch box लेके जा रहा है, right? So the government got involved, everybody got involved, because everybody was again paranoid. They wanted United States to be in the top, right? And here somebody else is getting better than them in a very critical field. All the legislations were formed कि जापान का माल हम लोग नहीं लेंगे, type of thing. I'm kind of extremely putting it out to you so that you can understand. And we see the same thing, these trade barriers and things like that. And who benefited in the process? Korea, right? They said the restrictions were on Japan, but Korea benefited. Japan couldn't dump cheaper chips in US, so that the price of the chips in US is higher, so that the companies inside US will survive. In that process, the Korean chips were cheaper, a lot cheaper, and they were to sell it to US for much higher. Okay, so Samsung did very well in that process. And as soon as the money comes into the picture, you start from assembly, but then you go into chip fabrication. Okay, I'll stop right here, just 1 second. I wanted to tell you the story of my experience, right? So my PhD mate, he was Sang-Soo Lee. He was from Korea. And I spent a lot of time with him because, and amazing, because you get to, with a person, a professional, you learn a lot about that country. I just noticed with him, now that when I look back, time with him, right, extremely tenacious person. Okay, and doesn't matter what happens, right? Something you fail, you do this, you fall down, he will get up and he will keep marching. Really, really, that property that I learned from him, no matter what happens, right? Don't let it get affected, and keep working. And the reason I'm telling you this is, it's like a feature of a country that I could see. Whenever I visit Korea, South Korea, I have visited Korea, and the first time I went there, I was like a guest. So there, you remember the story I told you about when he went to US, he was taking pictures, right? So here, Samsung, when I visit, they take my phone, they put sellotape everywhere, so that I cannot take any pictures. I mean, they remove all my fingerprints, everything, and then they seal it and then they give it to you. And when you leave, you will get your phone back only if you have not opened the. Like, I didn't feel good when they did it to my phone, right? So that's how paranoid they were. And same thing you'll see when you visit TSMC. That's exactly, you will see the same thing. But TSMC story comes in later. Next time I went to Samsung, the story was very different. I was treated like a royal person. They sent a limo to pick me up from the airport. Straight corridor, no security, nothing. I say, why? because we found bugs in their process. Okay, so suddenly they realized that ये बंदा इंडिया में से हमारी पीडीके में प्रॉब्लम्स निकाल रहा है. So they realized कुछ तो है इसमें, right? And we were totally treated differently. And I couldn't believe, because I had the first experience in the same Samsung. The second Samsung was very different. If you bring something to them, you know, they will treat you differently. Anyway, so if you go to Samsung, you will see people stay very, very late. You know, the culture is very different. You know, yeah, it's very different than our culture. So it's a very and same thing you see in Japan also, this work culture, and that's one of the reasons they are so successful. I'm not saying about balancing family life and all those things, but they are very nationalistic. They're focused on their work, and you know, every day they're trying to get ahead. You know, how do I get better? How do I make something better? Okay, so it's like my PhD thesis was sponsored by a Japanese company. So I was happy, paisa mil raha hai, right? But whenever, periodically I would do these reviews with them when they would come from Japan and visit me and my advisor, Professor Allstar, and they would look at all the presentations that I would give them, right? These are my simulation results. So I was designing these filters. For the first time in a digital CMOS, you could design filters. So there's a new technique that I had come up with on which I was doing these filters. And they would listen to everything that I had to say. And they would be happy, they will be nodding and everything. At the end, they'll come to my office. They'll come to my office and, Rajesh, let's go through your simulations. Very politely. And anybody else would feel insulted. Kya yaar, you don't believe me? No, we trust you. But chal dikha anyway. So everything you have to show them, and they would repeat the same thing on their side. Trust but verify. That's something I learned from them, right? You will trust everybody, but then you verify. And they were very, very focused on that one objective. Basically, if they are sponsoring a project, then they want to make sure that, imagine all your projects are sponsored, the companies come here and they look at your, tera circuit andar dekh lete, kahan se bias current aa raha hai. Literally like that. After a while, I enjoyed this whole process because somebody was seriously interested in my design, right? Otherwise, you just publish a paper and you get away with it, right? So that's the experience I have for today to share. So the Friday is going to be the most interesting story you have heard. So I'll just leave you with because there is a lot of masala, there is a lot of drama, and that particular story has affected me too. So thank you. I'll see you on Friday.